I will never forget the look of pure terror on Mr. David's face as he grabbed my shoulder at my mother-in-law's front gate. "Don't go in," he whispered urgently, his weathered hand trembling against my arm. His eyes darted nervously toward the house with its drawn curtains, something I'd never seen before at Margaret's place. She loved sunlight flooding through those windows. I barely had time to ask what he meant when the sound of my phone ringing shattered the tense moment. I glanced at the screen. It was my husband Michael calling for the third time that morning. But something in Mr. David's desperate expression made me silence it. What I discovered in the next few hours would completely shatter everything I thought I knew about the woman who had been helping my mother-in-law for the past 6 months. The woman I had trusted, the woman I had personally hired to care for Margaret while Michael and I lived 3 hours away in the city. But before I continue, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love to know how far our stories are reaching. It all started 5 days ago. I was folding laundry in our apartment when Michael came home early from work, his face creased with worry. He tossed his keys on the counter harder than usual, and I immediately knew something was wrong. "I just got off the phone with Mom," he said, loosening his tie. "Something's not right, Emma." My mother-in-law, Margaret, was 72 and had been living alone since Michael's father passed away 4 years ago. She was sharp as a tack, independent, and stubborn about keeping her house in the small town where she'd raised Michael. That stubbornness was exactly why we'd hired a live-in caretaker 6 months ago, after she had a minor fall. "What do you mean, not right?" I asked, setting down the shirt I was folding. She sounded confused, disoriented. She kept asking me the same questions over and over, like what day it was, whether I was still in high school. He ran his hand through his dark hair, a gesture he only did when he was really stressed, and her voice was slurred, "Emma," like she'd been drinking, but Mom doesn't drink. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Did you talk to Sophia? Maybe she knows what's going on." Sophia Martinez was the caretaker we'd hired through a reputable agency. She was 45, had excellent references, nursing credentials, and had seemed perfect for the job. Margaret had even mentioned in our weekly calls how kind Sophia was, how helpful, how she didn't know what she'd do without her. "That's the weird part," Michael continued. Sophia answered Mom's phone. "She said Mom's just tired, that she's been having some bad days, that it's probably just her age catching up with her. But Emma, my mom was fine 2 weeks ago when we visited. She beat me at chess, twice. I walked over and took his hand. Maybe we should drive down there. This weekend, just to check on her." Michael shook his head. "I can't. I've got that huge presentation Monday. The Henderson account. I've been working on it for months." He looked at me, his brown eyes filled with worry and guilt. "Could you go? Take Oliver with you? Mom would love to see her grandson, and you could assess the situation. If something's really wrong, I'll drop everything and come." I hesitated. Our 5-year-old son, Oliver, had just started kindergarten, and I didn't love the idea of pulling him out for a few days. But the worry in Michael's voice convinced me. "Okay," I agreed. "We'll surprise her tomorrow morning. Make it a fun grandma visit for Oliver." That night, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling settling in my stomach. I tried calling Margaret myself, but Sophia answered again, her voice smooth and pleasant as always. "Oh, Mrs. Emma, Margaret's sleeping right now. She had a very long day. You know how tiring physical therapy can be at her age." "Physical therapy?" I asked, confused. I didn't know she was doing physical therapy. "Oh yes," Sophia replied without missing a beat. "The doctor recommended it after her dizzy spells." "Didn't she mention it?" "Well, you know how she is. She doesn't like to worry you and Michael. So independent, that one. Dizzy spells?" This was the first I was hearing about any of this. "Sophia, I think I'm going to drive down tomorrow with Oliver. Just a quick visit to surprise her." There was the briefest pause on the other end. Just a fraction of a second, but I caught it. "Of course." What a wonderful surprise. Margaret will be so happy. "What time should I expect you?" Something in her eagerness felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. "Probably around noon. Don't tell her, though. I want to see her face when Oliver runs in." "My lips are sealed," Sophia said with a light laugh. "Drive safe, Mrs. Emma." When I hung up, Michael was watching me from the couch. "What did she say?" "Apparently your mom's been having dizzy spells. And she's in physical therapy." Michael frowned. Dizzy spells? She would have told us. That's what I thought. The next morning, I packed Oliver's favorite stuffed dinosaur, some snacks for the road, and our overnight bags. Oliver was thrilled about the surprise visit, chattering nonstop about showing Grandma Margaret the drawing he'd made of a spaceship. "Can we stop at that diner Grandma likes?" he asked from his car seat as we hit the highway. "The one with the really good pancakes?" "Sure, buddy," I replied, but my mind was elsewhere, running through worst-case scenarios. What if Margaret had dementia? What if she'd had a stroke and Sophia hadn't told us? What if I forced myself to stop? I was probably overreacting. Margaret was probably fine, just having an off day when Michael called. Old age came with its challenges, after all. The 3-hour drive felt longer than usual. Oliver fell asleep about halfway through, his little head tilted to the side, drool sliding down his chin. I used the quiet time to think, to plan what I'd say, what I'd look for. When we finally pulled onto Margaret's familiar street, everything looked normal. The quiet town with its tree-lined roads, the neighbor's garden with the pink flamingos, the corner store that had been there since Michael was a kid. It was early afternoon, the sun bright in a clear blue sky. Margaret's house was a charming yellow cottage with blue shutters, flower boxes in the windows, and a white picket fence that Michael's dad had painted the year before he died. But as I pulled up to the curb, I noticed something immediately wrong. All the curtains were drawn. Every single window was covered. Margaret hated that. She always said sunshine was free medicine, that she wanted every ray of light she could get. In all the years I'd known her, I'd never seen those curtains closed in the middle of the day. "Mommy, we're here," Oliver announced, suddenly wide awake and bouncing in his seat. I parked the car and got out slowly, studying the house. Sophia's silver Honda was in the driveway. Everything seemed quiet. Too quiet, maybe. "Come on, let's go surprise Grandma," I said, unbuckling Oliver and taking his hand. We were almost at the front gate when I heard a voice behind me. "Emma! Emma, wait!" I turned to see Mr. David, Margaret's neighbor of 30 years, hurrying across his lawn toward us. He was 75, a retired postal worker who usually moved with careful, measured steps. Now he was practically running, his face pale and drawn. "Mr. David?" I called out. "Is everything okay?" He reached us, breathing hard, and that's when he grabbed my shoulder with a trembling hand. His eyes were wide, frightened in a way that made my heart start racing. "Don't go in," he whispered urgently, glancing over his shoulder at the house. "What? Why not?" I pulled Oliver closer to me instinctively. "Is Margaret okay?" "Step aside, Sophia." My voice came out harder than I intended, but I didn't care. "I'm going to see my mother-in-law, now." For a long moment, we stared at each other. Something dangerous flashed in Sophia's eyes, something that made every hair on my neck stand up. Then she smiled again, wider this time, and stepped back. Of course, you're absolutely right. I'm just being overly cautious. You know how I worry about Margaret. Come in." I stepped into the house, and the smell hit me immediately. It wasn't the usual scent of Margaret's lavender potpourri and vanilla candles. It was stale, medicinal, with an underlying odor of something else. Something wrong. The living room was dark, the heavy curtains blocking out the afternoon sun. In the dimness, I could make out shapes of furniture, but everything looked different. Boxes were stacked in corners. Pictures had been taken off the walls, leaving pale rectangles on the wallpaper. "What's going on here?" I asked, turning to Sophia. "Why are you packing things?" "Oh, that," Sophia waved her hand dismissively. "Margaret asked me to help her declutter. You know how it is. Old age, wanting to simplify things. We're donating some items to charity." Margaret had never mentioned wanting to declutter. She loved every knickknack, every photo, every memory in this house. "Where is she, Sophia?" "In her bedroom." "But Emma, really, she's very—" I didn't wait for her to finish. I walked past her, down the familiar hallway toward Margaret's bedroom. Sophia's footsteps followed close behind me. "Emma, wait. You should let me—" I pushed open the bedroom door. The curtains were drawn here too, the room in almost complete darkness. I could make out the shape of Margaret in her bed, lying so still that for one horrible moment I thought, "Margaret?" I called out, rushing to her side. I turned on the bedside lamp. What I saw made my blood run cold. My mother-in-law was lying in bed, her eyes half open but unfocused, staring at nothing. Her skin was pale, almost gray, with a sheen of sweat on her forehead. Her mouth was slightly open, and when she breathed, it was shallow and labored. But it was her wrists that made me gasp. They were bruised. Dark purple marks circled both wrists, like she'd been restrained. What the hell happened to her? I spun around to face Sophia, who stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "She fell," Sophia said calmly. "I told you she's been having dizzy spells. I had to catch her. And I guess I grabbed her too hard. Old skin bruises easily, you know." I looked back at Margaret. Her eyes slowly moved toward me, seeming to struggle to focus. Her lips moved, trying to form words, but only a weak sound came out. "Margaret, it's me. It's Emma." I took her hand gently, shocked by how cold it felt. "Can you hear me?" Her fingers twitched in mine. Her mouth moved again. This time I leaned closer, and I could barely make out the whisper. "Help! Help me!" I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I turned to Sophia, my voice shaking with rage and fear. "What did you do to her?" Sophia's expression changed. The fake, pleasant smile disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculated. She crossed her arms and leaned against the doorframe. "I think," she said slowly, "you should leave now, Emma. Margaret's not well. She's confused. She doesn't know what she's saying. Like hell, I'm leaving." I pulled out my phone. "I'm calling 911. I wouldn't do that if I were you." Something in her tone made me freeze. I looked up. Sophia was holding something in her hand. A syringe. "What is that?" I demanded. "Just Margaret's medication," Sophia said, but her smile was cruel now. "She needs it every few hours, to keep her calm, to keep her manageable." My mind was racing. This wasn't medication. This was, "You've been drugging her," I whispered, horror washing over me. "You've been keeping her sedated." Sophia tilted her head, considering me. "Margaret's been very generous these past months. Very generous indeed. New bank accounts in my name, changes to her will, a power of attorney that gives me control of her finances. It's amazing what a confused old woman will sign when she doesn't quite know what she's doing." "You're stealing from her." My hand tightened on my phone. "I prefer to think of it as compensation for my services. Do you know how exhausting it is to take care of old people? They should be grateful someone's willing to do it. I'm calling the police." I started to dial. Sophia moved faster than I expected. She crossed the room and grabbed my wrist, her fingers digging in painfully. The syringe was inches from my face. "I don't think you will," she hissed. "Because if you do, I'll make sure Margaret gets a dose of something that'll stop her heart. And you'll be the one who caused it. Think about that. Think about explaining to Michael how you got his mother killed." We were locked in a standoff, her fingers tight on my wrist, the syringe gleaming in the lamplight. Margaret lay between us, barely conscious, helpless. My mind raced through options. I was stronger than I looked, but Sophia had the advantage of surprise and that syringe. If I fought her, if I screamed, what would happen to Margaret? What would happen to Oliver, still sitting on Mr. David's porch, waiting for me? Then, cutting through the tension like a knife, came the sound of sirens in the distance. Sophia's head snapped toward the window. "What did you—" "I didn't do anything," I said, my heart pounding with desperate hope. The sirens grew louder, closer. Sophia's grip on my wrist loosened slightly as she stepped toward the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to peek out. "No," she breathed. "No, no, no." Through the gap in the curtain, I could see the flashing lights of police cars pulling up to the curb. 2 of them, officers getting out. Sophia whirled back to face me, her face twisted with rage. "You called them before you came in. You set me up." "I didn't," I insisted. "It was the truth. But then I realized, Mr. David. He must have called while I was inside. Bless that wonderful, observant old man." A loud knock came from the front door. "Police, open up." Sophia stood frozen. the syringe still in her hand, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal looking for an escape route. "It's over, Sophia," I said quietly. "Let it be over." For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Sophia's eyes were wild, calculating, her knuckles white around the syringe. I could see her mind working, trying to find a way out, trying to salvage whatever twisted plan she'd been running. The pounding on the door came again, louder this time. "This is the police. We need you to open this door immediately." Sophia's gaze snapped from me to Margaret's frail form in the bed, then back to me. Something shifted in her expression, resignation mixed with spite. "You know what?" she said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You self-righteous people make me sick. You hire someone to do your dirty work, to wipe up after your old relatives because you can't be bothered to move closer, and then you judge when we take what we deserve." "What you deserve?" I shot back, my fear turning to anger. "You were paid well. You were trusted. Margaret welcomed you into her home." "Paid well?" Sophia laughed bitterly. $22 an hour to be on call 24/7? To change? Diapers and listen to the same stories over and over? To give up my life to babysit someone who doesn't even remember my name half the time? Then you should have quit. Not this." I gestured at Margaret's sedated form, at the bruises on her wrists. The front door crashed open. I heard boots on the hardwood floor, voices calling out. "Back bedroom!" I shouted. "We're in the back bedroom!" Sophia's face contorted. For one terrifying second, I thought she was going to use that syringe. On Margaret, on me, I wasn't sure. But then her shoulders slumped, and she let it drop to the floor. "It doesn't matter," she muttered. "It's done. The money's already moved. You'll never find it all." 2 police officers burst through the bedroom door, hands on their weapons. "Hands up, now!" Sophia slowly raised her hands. One officer, a tall black man with graying hair and a nameplate that read Officer Williams, immediately moved to secure her, pulling her arms behind her back and cuffing her wrists. The other officer, a younger woman with red hair pulled back in a tight bun, came to me. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" "No, I'm fine, but my mother-in-law—" I gestured to Margaret. "She needs an ambulance. She's been drugged. I don't know with what or how much, but she needs help right now." The female officer, Officer Chen according to her badge, immediately radioed for paramedics. Then she moved to Margaret's side, gently checking her pulse, her pupils, her breathing. "Pulse is weak but steady," she reported. "Pupils are responsive but sluggish." "Ma'am," she said gently to Margaret, "can you hear me? Can you squeeze my hand?" Margaret's fingers moved slightly, a weak squeeze that nonetheless made my heart surge with hope. She was still in there. She was still fighting. "The ambulance is 2 minutes out," Officer Chen said, looking at me with kind eyes. "You did the right thing getting here when you did." "I didn't even call you," I admitted. "I think her neighbor did." "Mr. David Frost?" Officer Williams asked, securing Sophia in a chair by the window, keeping a firm hand on her shoulder. "Yeah, he called. Said he'd been worried about Mrs. Anderson for days, that something wasn't right. When he saw you arrive and confront the caretaker, he decided it was time to make the call. Smart man." I silently thanked God for nosy neighbors who actually paid attention. The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Paramedics rushed in with equipment and a stretcher. They started an IV, checked Margaret's vitals, asked me rapid-fire questions I could barely answer. What medications was she on? Did she have any allergies? How long had she been like this? "I don't know," I kept saying. "I don't know. We haven't seen her in 2 weeks. She seemed fine then." One of the paramedics, a middle-aged Latino man with gentle hands, looked up at me. "Ma'am, based on her symptoms and what you've told us about the situation, it looks like she's been given some kind of sedative. Probably benzodiazepines, maybe something stronger. We're going to transport her to County General. They'll run a full tox screen, get her stabilized." "I'm coming with her," I said immediately. "Of course. But first, Officer Williams interjected. "We need to ask you a few questions, and we need you to tell us everything you know." I watched as they loaded Margaret onto the stretcher, her eyes now closed, her breathing a little steadier with the oxygen mask they'd placed over her face. She looked so small, so fragile. Nothing. Like the strong, vibrant woman who taught me how to make her famous apple pie when I first started dating Michael, who'd held my hand in the delivery room when Oliver was born because Michael had nearly fainted. As they wheeled her out, I caught a glimpse of Mr. David standing in the front yard with Oliver. My son looked scared, confused, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. Mr. David had his hand on Oliver's shoulder protectively. I rushed out to them. "Oliver, baby grandma's sick, but the doctors are going to help her, okay? She's going to be fine." "Why is that lady in handcuffs?" Oliver asked, his eyes wide as he watched the officers lead Sophia out of the house. She didn't look at us, her face hard and expressionless. "She did some bad things," I said simply. "But the police caught her, so everything's going to be okay now." Mr. David met my eyes over Oliver's head. "I'm sorry I didn't call sooner. I wasn't sure. I thought maybe I was being paranoid. Old people can be paranoid, you know." "You called exactly when you needed to," I assured him, squeezing his arm. "You probably saved her life." "I'll watch the boy," he said. "You go with Margaret. Take all the time you need." I hugged Oliver tight, kissed his forehead, and promised I'd be back soon. Then I climbed into the ambulance, holding Margaret's cold hand as we raced toward the hospital. At County General, they rushed Margaret into the ER. I was left in a waiting room with fluorescent lights and uncomfortable plastic chairs, my phone in my hand. I needed to call Michael. I'd been putting it off, not wanting to panic him while he was 3 hours away, but he needed to know. He answered on the first ring. "Emma, how's Mom? Did you get there okay?" I took a deep breath. "Michael, you need to sit down." The tone of my voice must have scared him because he went quiet. "What happened?" I told him everything. The drawn curtains, Mr. David's warning, finding Margaret sedated and bruised, Sophia's confession, the police, all of it. With each word, I could hear his breathing get heavier on the other end. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then, "I'm getting in the car right now. I'll be there in 3 hours. Less if I speed. Michael, I'm coming, Emma. That's my mom. I should have been there. I should have—" His voice cracked. "You couldn't have known," I said firmly. "Sophia had all of us fooled. The agency, us, everyone. Don't blame yourself. I'll be there as soon as I can. I love you. I love you too. Drive safe." After we hung up, a doctor came out, a tired-looking woman in her 50s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Anderson? I'm Dr. Patel. I've been treating your mother-in-law." I stood up quickly. "How is she?" "Stable. Her blood work shows high levels of lorazepam and zolpidem, both sedatives. Based on the levels, we believe she's been receiving regular doses for at least a week, possibly longer. We're administering flumazenil to counteract the effects, and we've got her on fluids to help flush her system. Will she be okay? Any permanent damage?" Dr. Patel's expression was cautious. "The next 24 hours are critical. The good news is she's responding to treatment. She's been able to communicate a little. She knows her name. She knows she's in the hospital. But we won't know the full extent of any cognitive effects until the drugs are completely out of her system. There's also the matter of the physical restraints." My stomach turned. "The bruises on her wrists." "Yes, and we found some on her ankles as well. She appears to have been tied down at various points. We've documented everything for the police investigation." Dr. Patel put a hand on my shoulder. "I have to say, you got here just in time. Another few days of those sedative levels, especially in a woman her age, and we could have been looking at respiratory failure, coma, or worse." I felt tears burn my eyes for the first time since this nightmare started. "Can I see her?" "For a few minutes. She's in and out of consciousness, but I think it would be good for her to hear a familiar voice." Dr. Patel led me through the ER to a small curtained area where Margaret lay in a hospital bed. IV lines running into both arms, monitors beeping steadily around her. Her color was already better than it had been at the house, less gray, more of the healthy pink I associated with her. I pulled a chair close and took her hand gently. Careful of the IV. Margaret, it's Emma. You're safe now. You're at the hospital, and Michael's on his way. Oliver's fine. He's with Mr. David. Everyone's okay. Her eyelids fluttered. Slowly they opened, and for the first time in who knows how long, her eyes were clear. They focused on my face, and recognition sparked in them. Emma, she whispered, her voice rough and raw. I'm here. I'm right here. A tear slid down her cheek. I tried to tell her no. Tried to stop her, I know. It's okay. You don't have to talk about it now, she said no one would believe me, that everyone would think I was just a confused old woman. Her grip on my hand tightened slightly. The papers. She made me sign papers. I didn't want to, but she said she'd hurt Michael if I didn't. Rage flooded through me. Sophia had threatened Michael to control Margaret. She'd used our family against this sweet woman who'd never hurt anyone in her life. It's over now, I said, stroking her hair back from her forehead. The police have her. She can't hurt anyone anymore. My house? She was packing my things. Said I was going into a home. That the house would be sold. I felt a chill. That was Sophia's endgame. Get Margaret declared incompetent, put her in a nursing home while drugged and compliant, and sell off everything she owned. How much had she already taken? How much had she already stolen? A nurse came in to check Margaret's vitals. I'm sorry, but she needs to rest now. The doctor will come get you when she wakes up again. I squeezed Margaret's hand one more time. I'll be right outside. Michael will be here soon. We're not leaving you. Back in the waiting room, I found 2 detectives waiting for me. A man and a woman, both in plain clothes, with badges clipped to their belts. Mrs. Anderson? I'm Detective Morrison. This is Detective Hayes, the woman said. She was in her 40s, with short brown hair and sharp eyes that didn't miss anything. We need to ask you some questions about Sophia Martinez and what you witnessed today. I spent the next hour telling them everything I knew, everything I'd seen. They recorded it all, taking notes, asking follow-up questions. When I mentioned the papers Sophia had forced Margaret to sign, Detective Hayes leaned forward. Did she say what kind of papers? Margaret mentioned bank accounts and a will, and power of attorney. Sophia said she'd gotten power of attorney. The detectives exchanged a look. We're going to need to get warrants for Mrs. Anderson Sr.'s financial records. If Sophia Martinez has been systematically draining her accounts, we need to trace where that money went. She said something, I remembered suddenly. Right before you arrested her. She said the money was already moved, that we'd never find it all. Detective Morrison's jaw tightened. We've seen this before. These caregivers, not all of them, most are wonderful people, but the bad ones, they target elderly victims who are isolated. They gain trust, then they gain control. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars are gone. Hundreds of thousands? I felt sick. We won't know the full extent until we can access all the records, but yeah, it's possible. Mrs. Anderson owned her house outright, right? No mortgage? Yes, Michael's father paid it off years ago. Then she likely had significant equity, plus retirement accounts, savings, Social Security. For someone like Sophia, a victim like that is a gold mine. I thought about Margaret, lying in that hospital bed, barely conscious, and felt a wave of helplessness. Can you get the money back? We'll do everything we can, Detective Hayes said, but her tone wasn't promising. If she's moved it offshore or converted it to cash, it gets complicated. But we'll trace every transaction, follow every lead. And the good news is, we've got her. She's not going to be able to continue victimizing people from a jail cell. Is there anything else I can do? Actually, yes. We're going to need to go through Mrs. Anderson's house. It's a crime scene now. We'll be looking for documentation, forged signatures, anything Sophia might have left behind. It would help if you or your husband could identify what belongs there and what doesn't. I nodded. Michael will be here in a couple hours. We can do that. After the detectives left, I sat alone with my thoughts. The waiting room had a TV mounted in the corner, playing some daytime talk show with the volume low. An elderly couple sat across from me, holding hands, waiting for news about someone they loved. A young mother was trying to keep her toddler entertained with a picture book. Normal people dealing with normal crises. Not this. Not evil masquerading as caregiving. My phone buzzed. A text from Mr. David. Oliver is doing fine. We're making cookies. Take your time, I smiled despite everything. Then another text, this one from Michael. 2 hours away. How is she? Stable, awake, asking about you. Drive safe. I love you both. When Michael finally burst through the hospital doors an hour and 45 minutes later, he'd definitely been speeding. I'd never been so happy to see him. He wrapped me in a tight hug, and I felt some of the tension I'd been holding finally release. Where is she? He asked. Room 237. They moved her upstairs about an hour ago. She's sleeping, but Dr. Patel said she's improving. We went up together. When Michael saw his mother, small and pale in the hospital bed, but breathing steadily, color returning to her face, he broke down. I'd only seen my husband cry a handful of times in our 8 years together. At our wedding, when Oliver was born, at his father's funeral. Now was the 4th time. He pulled a chair close and took her hand. Mom, I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't realize sooner. Margaret's eyes opened. When she saw Michael, she smiled, weak but genuine. My boy, she whispered. I'm here, Mom. Emma and I are both here. You're safe now. I knew you'd come. They talked quietly for a few minutes until Margaret drifted back to sleep. Michael sat back, wiping his eyes. I hired her, he said quietly. I did the interview. I checked her references. This is my fault. No, I said firmly. This is Sophia's fault. She's a con artist, Michael. She probably had fake references, a whole fake history. You did what any good son would do, tried to make sure your mom was taken care of. I should have visited more. Should have called more. You called her every week. We visited every other weekend until I stopped, realization dawning. Until Sophia started making excuses, remember? The last month she kept saying Margaret was tired, or not feeling well, or had other plans. Michael's eyes widened. She was isolating her, making sure we didn't see what was really happening. And when your mom called you confused that day, that was probably the first time she managed to get to the phone without Sophia controlling the conversation. It was all so calculated, so deliberate. Sophia had been playing a long game, and we'd walked right into it. Dr. Patel came in to check on Margaret. After examining her, she pulled us aside with good news. The sedatives are clearing her system faster than expected. She's lucid for longer periods, her vitals are strong, and I think we're out of the danger zone. I want to keep her here for a few more days for observation. Run some cognitive tests to make sure there's no lasting damage. But I'm cautiously optimistic. It was the first truly good news of this whole nightmare. That evening, after making sure Margaret was settled for the night, Michael and I drove to her house. Police tape crossed the front door. Detective Morrison met us there with a key. We've already done our initial sweep, she said. Collected some evidence, but we need your help identifying anomalies, things that seem out of place or missing. Walking into that house was surreal. In the daylight that now streamed through the open curtains, I could see the full extent of what Sophia had been doing. Half the furniture was gone. The antique sideboard that had been Margaret's grandmother's, gone. The grandfather clock that had stood in the hallway for 40 years, gone. Pictures, knickknacks, books, all packed in boxes or simply vanished. She was cleaning it out, Michael said, his voice hollow, getting ready to sell everything. In Margaret's bedroom, we found the worst of it. A notebook hidden under the mattress in Sophia's handwriting. It was a ledger of sorts, tracking medications given, times, dosages, notes about Margaret's compliance and when she needed additional encouragement. There were also bank statements, dozens of them. Accounts Michael and I had never heard of, all with Margaret's name but Sophia's signature as power of attorney. Withdrawals, transfers, cashier's checks made out to names we didn't recognize. This is good, Detective Morrison said, carefully bagging the evidence. This is very good. She documented her own crimes. In the closet, we found something even more chilling, a file folder labeled Next. Inside were profiles, printed obituaries of recently deceased people, their surviving spouses' names highlighted, addresses, phone numbers, notes about their financial situations. Sophia had been planning her next victim. How many people has she done this to? I asked, feeling sick. We're looking into that now, the detective replied. The agency she came through, we're investigating them too. How she got past their background checks, whether they were negligent or complicit. Michael picked up a framed photo from one of the boxes, his parents on their wedding day, young and happy and full of hope for the future. His hands were shaking. "I want her to pay," he said quietly. "For every day she hurt my mother, for every dollar she stole, for all of it." "We're going to make sure she does," Detective Morrison promised. "With what we have, she's looking at elder abuse, theft, fraud, forgery, unlawful restraint. She's going to be in prison for a long time." As we left the house that night, I looked back at the yellow cottage with its blue shutters. It had been a home full of love and memories. Sophia had tried to turn it into a crime scene, a hunting ground, but she'd failed. Margaret was alive. The truth was out. And now, the long process of healing could begin. 3 days later, Margaret was sitting up in her hospital bed, sipping tea and complaining about the food, which Dr. Patel said was the best sign of recovery she could ask for. "Hospital scrambled eggs shouldn't be gray," Margaret insisted, poking at her breakfast tray with a fork. "Gray eggs aren't natural," Michael laughed, the first real laugh I'd heard from him since this whole thing started. "Mom, you're supposed to be resting, not critiquing the kitchen." "I can do both," she said with a spark of her old spirit. Then her expression softened. "Oliver was here yesterday." He drew me a picture. She pointed to the window ledge where Oliver's crayon drawing was taped, a picture of the 3 of them. Grandma Margaret, Oliver and his dinosaur, all holding hands under a rainbow. "He wants to know when you're coming home," I said. Margaret's face clouded slightly. "Home. I don't know if I can go back to that house, Emma. Every room, I'll just see her. Remember what she did." "You don't have to decide that now," Michael said gently, taking her hand. "We've got time." Detective Morrison arrived later that morning with updates. She pulled 2 chairs close to Margaret's bed, her expression serious but with a hint of satisfaction. "Mrs. Anderson, I wanted to update you personally on where we are with the investigation into Sophia Martinez." Margaret straightened up, her jaw setting in that determined way I'd come to recognize. "Tell me everything. First, the good news. We've traced most of your money. Sophia moved approximately $340,000 from various accounts, your savings, your retirement fund, and a home equity line of credit she opened in your name." I gasped. $340,000. That was Margaret's entire life savings. Everything she and her late husband had worked for. "However," Detective Morrison continued, "she didn't have time to move it all offshore. Most of it is in domestic accounts we can freeze and recover. We estimate you'll get back around 80 to 90%. "And the rest?" Margaret asked. "She converted about $40,000 to cash and cryptocurrency. That'll be harder to trace, but we're working with federal investigators. Even if we can't recover it all, she won't be able to access it from prison." "How long?" Michael asked. "How long will she be in prison?" "She's being charged with 13 felonies. Elder abuse, grand theft, fraud, forgery, identity theft, unlawful restraint, assault. With the evidence we have, the notebook, the forged documents, the financial records, your mother's testimony, and Emma's eyewitness account, the DA is confident. We're looking at 15 to 20 years, possibly more." Margaret closed her eyes briefly. "Good. There's something else," the detective said. "We've identified 2 other victims, elderly women in neighboring counties. Similar MO, gained their trust, isolated them, drugged them, stole their money. One of them died 6 months ago. The room went silent." "Died?" I whispered. Detective Morrison nodded grimly. "Initially ruled natural causes, heart failure. But given what we now know, we're having the case reopened, looking into whether Sophia's care contributed to or caused her death. If we can prove that, we're looking at manslaughter or murder charges." Margaret's hand tightened on the bedsheets. "That could have been me, but it wasn't," Michael said firmly. "Because Emma got there in time. Because Mr. David paid attention. You're alive, Mom. You're going to be fine." Detective Morrison stood to leave, but paused at the door. "Mrs. Anderson, I've been working elder abuse cases for 12 years. Most of them, we don't get happy endings. The victims don't survive, or the families don't realize until it's too late, or we can't get enough evidence to prosecute. This time we got her, and you're gonna recover. That's a win in my book." After she left, the 3 of us sat in silence for a moment. Then Margaret spoke, her voice stronger than it had been. "I want to testify. When this goes to trial, I want to look her in the eye and tell everyone what she did. Mom, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do. For me, for those other women, For anyone else, she might have hurt if she'd gotten away with it. Margaret looked at both of us. I'm 72 years old, and I survived a con artist who tried to drug me to death and steal everything I had. I'm not going to be quiet about it, I smiled. There was the Margaret I knew, the retired schoolteacher who'd faced down rowdy teenagers for 30 years, who'd stood up to the town council when they tried to cut the library budget, who'd never backed down from a fight that mattered. Then we'll be right there with you, I said. Every step of the way. Margaret was discharged from the hospital 5 days after she was admitted. Michael and I had spent those days making arrangements. Margaret couldn't go back to her house, not yet, maybe not ever. So we made a decision. Mom, we want you to move in with us, Michael said on the day of her discharge. We've got the spare room. Oliver would love having you close. And honestly, we'd love having you there too, I nodded. We've already talked to Oliver about it. He's so excited he wants to give you his room and sleep on the couch. I laughed. We told him that wasn't necessary. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to be a burden. You could never be a burden, I said firmly. You're family, and after what you've been through, you deserve to be surrounded by people who love you. She agreed, and 2 weeks later, we moved her into our home. It required some adjustments, converting the home office into a bedroom, rearranging schedules, learning to navigate 3 generations under one roof. But Oliver was thrilled to have Grandma there for breakfast every morning. Margaret slowly regained her strength, her sharp mind fully recovered from the drugs. And something unexpected happened. Having her there, being part of our daily lives instead of someone we saw every other weekend, it was a gift. She helped Oliver with his homework. She taught me her famous apple pie recipe, finally. She and Michael would sit up late talking about his father, sharing memories, healing old wounds. The trial came 4 months later. Sophia Martinez pleaded not guilty, which meant everything went to court. Margaret testified for 2 hours, calm and clear, detailing every moment of her ordeal. When Sophia's lawyer tried to suggest she'd been confused, that she'd willingly given Sophia power of attorney, Margaret looked him dead in the eye. Young man, I taught high school English for 30 years. I know the difference between being confused and being drugged against my will. I know the difference between a gift and theft. And I know the difference between kindness and evil. That woman, she pointed at Sophia, is a thief and a predator, and I'll remember every detail of what she did until the day I die. The courtroom was silent. I testified too. Described finding Margaret barely conscious, the bruises on her wrists, Sophia's cold confession, the syringe in her hand. Michael testified about the forged documents, the stolen money, the systematic isolation of his mother. Mr. David testified about what he'd observed, about the closed curtains and Margaret's sudden disappearance from her daily routines, about how his gut told him something was terribly wrong. The other victims, the 2 women Sophia had scammed before Margaret, their families testified about similar patterns. The woman who'd died, her daughter sobbed on the stand describing how Sophia had isolated her mother in the final months of her life, how they'd been denied visits, how everything was gone by the time she died. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, guilty on all counts. When the verdict was read, Sophia showed emotion for the first time, but it wasn't remorse. It was rage. She turned to glare at Margaret, at me, at all of us, her face twisted with hate. You people have everything, she spat as the bailiff moved to escort her out. You don't know what it's like to have nothing, to be nothing. I did what I had to do to survive. You didn't have to hurt people, Margaret said quietly. You chose to. Sophia was sentenced to 23 years in prison. With her age and the length of the sentence, it was likely she'd spend the rest of her life behind bars. As we left the courthouse that day, Margaret stopped on the steps, turned her face to the sun, and took a deep breath. It's over, she said. It's really over. Michael put his arm around her shoulders. Yeah, Mom, it is. 6 months after the trial, Margaret made a decision about her house. She sold it, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Too many bad memories, she said. Time for someone else to make it a home again. With the money from the sale and the recovered funds from Sophia's theft, Margaret was financially secure. But more than that, she was happy. Really genuinely happy. You know what? she said one evening as we all sat around the dinner table, me, Michael, Oliver, and her. Oliver was showing her a school project about dinosaurs, talking a mile a minute while Margaret listened with complete attention. "What's that?" I asked. Sophia tried to take everything from me. My money, my dignity, my life? But she failed. Margaret smiled, watching Oliver with such love in her eyes. Because the things that really matter, my family, my memories, my strength, she couldn't touch those. And now I get to see my grandson every day. I get to be part of your lives in a way I never was before. In a strange way, what happened brought us all closer together. Michael reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I'm just glad you're here, Mom." "Me too, son. Me too." A year after that terrible day when I'd pulled up to Margaret's house and Mr. David had warned me not to go in, we had a celebration. Oliver's 6th birthday party in our backyard, with streamers and balloons and way too much cake. Mr. David was there. We'd stayed in touch, and he'd become like an adopted grandfather to Oliver. He and Margaret sat in lawn chairs, watching the kids play, trading stories about the old neighborhood. Detective Morrison stopped by too, off duty, bringing a gift for Oliver. She'd become a friend through the whole process. "How's she doing?" the detective asked me quietly, nodding toward Margaret, who was laughing at something Mr. David said. "She's doing great," I said. "Some days are harder than others. She has nightmares sometimes, gets anxious about locked doors. But she's in therapy and she's strong. Stronger than I think she even knew. And you?" I thought about it. "I'm okay. More careful about who I trust, maybe. More aware of how vulnerable our elderly loved ones are. But mostly just grateful. Grateful I listened to my gut that day. Grateful for nosy neighbors." I smiled at Mr. David. Grateful it wasn't worse. "The other victims' families asked me to thank you," Detective Morrison said. "Because you spoke up, because you pushed, we were able to get justice for their loved ones too. That matters." As the sun set on the party, I watched my little family. Michael helping Oliver blow out candles, Margaret clapping and cheering. All of us together and safe and whole. Sophia had tried to destroy us. She'd tried to steal not just money, but joy, trust, and love. But she'd failed. We'd survived. We'd fought back, and we'd come out stronger on the other side. Margaret caught my eye across the yard and smiled. Not the weak, drugged smile I'd seen in that dark bedroom a year ago, but a real smile, full of life and love and hope for the future. I smiled back, and in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty everything was gonna be okay. Better than okay. We were home. We were together. We were safe. And we were happy. Really, truly, perfectly happy. The end. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you or someone you know experienced something similar? Your story could help someone else. And remember, always trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, speak up. You might just save a life. See you in the next video.